Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. Life, as I knew it, was comfortably predictable until it wasn't. It's funny how you think you know everything about loyalty, trust, and the bonds that tie you to those closest to you. That is, until those very bonds are tested, stretched to their breaking point, and ultimately snap right before your eyes. My name's Alex, a mechanic by trade and a simple man by choice. My life? It was nothing out of the ordinary. Work, home, and the occasional splash of excitement, I began, recounting the tale to an old friend over a dimly lit bar table, the kind of place where life's miseries found solace in the bottom of a glass. You see, I had this friend, Jake. We were as close as brothers, or so I thought. Friendship, to me, was an unwavering rock, a beacon in the storm. It meant having someone's back no matter what, knowing they'd have yours in return, I explained, the bitterness of betrayal lacing my words as I took a sip from my drink, the ice clinking mockingly in the glass. Sarah, my wife, was the other half of my world. A librarian, whose love for books almost rivaled her love for me. Our life together was simple: movies, walks in the park, and those quiet moments that spoke volumes. Yet, beneath the surface of our seemingly tranquil existence, there lurked a silent storm, brewing in the depths of unspoken desires and unmet needs. Our intimate life, well, that was the chink in our armor. Sarah wanted more passion, more excitement, more of me than I could give. The physical toll of my job left me drained, a mere shadow of the man she needed me to be, I confessed, the weight of my failures pressing down on me like the heavy air before a storm. One evening, as I toiled away in the garage, Jake's call broke through the monotony of engine noise and the smell of oil. Alex, my man, how about a weekend getaway? Just the gang, at a lake resort. It'll be epic. Jake's voice was full of that infectious enthusiasm he was known for. I mulled over the idea, the prospect of a break from the daily grind tempting. Yet, it was Sarah's opinion that mattered most. I'll talk to Sarah about it, I replied, wiping my hands on a rag, the grease staining the fabric a deep black. Sarah's reaction to the plan was beyond enthusiastic. Oh, Alex, Jake already told me about the trip. We have to go. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, a sight I hadn't seen in far too long. Yet, a nagging doubt tugged at my heart. Why had Jake reached out to her first? A question that hung in the air, unasked, as I nodded in agreement. The days leading up to the trip were a flurry of activity. Sarah was a whirlwind of excitement, planning, and packing. Our kitchen table was buried under maps and guides, her voice full of dreams and plans. This is going to be amazing, she said, her smile lighting up the room. I wanted to believe her, to share in her joy fully, yet a shadow of unease lingered. Shopping for the trip brought its own set of revelations. Sarah, in her element, chose a swimsuit that left little to the imagination. The sight of her, radiant and confident, stirred a mix of emotions within me: desire, pride, and an undercurrent of fear. We're only going for a couple of days, Sarah. Not a month, I joked, attempting to lighten the mood. She laughed, a sound that used to bring me comfort, now tinged with an unfamiliar edge. Oh, Alex, don't be such a worrywart. It's going to be fun, she reassured me, her hand finding mine, a gesture of connection I desperately needed. The trip was set, the plans made. Little did I know, it would be the beginning of a journey that would take me through the darkest corners of betrayal, testing the very essence of what I thought friendship and love meant. As I shared my story, the words poured out, a torrent of pain, confusion, and the bitter taste of betrayal, marking the end of one chapter of my life and the uncertain start of another. The morning of our departure dawned bright and clear, a mocking omen of the chaos that lay ahead. I was up before the sun, the restlessness of the night giving way to a quiet dread as I prepared for the trip. The sound of the engine coming to life outside signaled Jake's arrival. Punctual as ever, with Ethan in tow, their laughter a stark contrast to the silence of our home. Ready for an adventure, Alex? Jake called out, his voice booming with excitement as he clapped me on the back, a wide grin plastered on his face. Yeah, let's do this, I replied, forcing a smile, trying to shake off the unease that clung to me like a second skin. Sarah emerged, her energy infectious, her bags packed with the precision of someone who had been planning this escape for months rather than days. This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to get there, she exclaimed, her enthusiasm filling the room, pushing away the shadows of doubt, if only for a moment. The drive to the lake was a blur of landscapes whizzing by, the drone of the tires on the asphalt a steady backdrop to the chatter inside the SUV. Sarah and Mia were engrossed in conversation, their laughter floating back to me as I sat in silence, lost in thought. "We're here," Ethan announced, pulling into the gravel driveway of the lake house, the vehicle coming to a stop with a crunch of gravel under tires. The place was secluded, surrounded by towering pines and the calm expanse of the lake stretching out before us, a serene setting for what was supposed to be a weekend of relaxation. "Wow, this place is amazing," Sarah breathed, stepping out of the car, her gaze sweeping over the landscape, a look of wonder on her face. "It's perfect," I agreed, the natural beauty of the place momentarily easing the tension within me. We unloaded the car, the sound of our footsteps and laughter echoing in the quiet of the morning. The cabin was rustic, a charming structure of wood and stone that promised warmth and comfort. We explored the rooms, claiming spaces with the ease of familiarity, the excitement of the new surroundings pushing aside the complexities of our relationships. As the day unfolded, we found ourselves on the dock, the cool breeze off the lake a welcome respite from the warmth of the sun. "Who's up for a swim?" Jake challenged, his competitive streak surfacing as he stripped off his shirt, revealing the muscles honed by countless hours at the gym. "You're on," Ethan replied, the two of them diving into the lake, their laughter a challenge to the rest of us. Sarah hesitated, her gaze meeting mine, a question in her eyes. "Come on, Alex. It'll be fun," she urged, her voice a mix of excitement and something else I couldn't quite place. With a nod, I followed, the cold shock of the water a sharp contrast to the warmth of the sun, a moment of pure, unadulterated freedom that washed away the doubts and fears, if only for a moment. The day passed in a haze of activity, swimming, exploring, and the simple joy of being together away from the constraints of our daily lives. We laughed, we talked, and for a brief, shining moment, the world outside the boundaries of the lake house ceased to exist. As night fell, we gathered around the fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on our faces as we shared stories and marshmallows, the crackle of the fire a soothing soundtrack to our camaraderie. Yet, as the fire burned down to embers, the darkness seemed to press in closer, the laughter fading as the reality of our tangled lives crept back in. I watched Sarah, her face illuminated by the dying light, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, and I wondered what lay behind that facade. The night brought with it a restlessness that I couldn't shake, the silence of the cabin amplifying the noise in my head, the doubts and fears that I had pushed aside coming back to haunt me. As I lay in the darkness, listening to the sound of Sarah's breathing, I knew that the weekend had only just begun, and the true test of our relationships, of my trust, was still to come. The dawn of our second day at the lake house greeted us with a palette of pinks and oranges, painting the sky in hues that promised a day filled with new adventures and undiscovered paths. The night had passed in a restless symphony of thoughts and half-dreams, leaving me bleary-eyed but determined to make the most out of this escape. "Morning, sunshine," Sarah teased, her voice cutting through the quiet of the early morning. She was already up, the embodiment of morning radiance, while I struggled to find my bearings, the weight of sleep still clinging to me. "Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day," I mumbled, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, trying to match her enthusiasm. The aroma of coffee filled the air, a beckoning call to the start of the day. Breakfast was a communal affair, the kitchen a hive of activity as we all pitched in. "Who's ready for some eggs?" Jake boomed, wielding a frying pan like a chef in his element, while Mia and Ethan set the table, their movements synchronized in the comfortable dance of a couple well-versed in each other's rhythms. "We should explore the area today," Sarah suggested, her eyes alight with the thrill of adventure. "There's a trail nearby that leads to a lookout point. The view is supposed to be breathtaking." Her excitement was contagious, and despite the lingering shadows of doubt, I found myself drawn into the moment, the prospect of discovering something new a welcome distraction from the tumult of my thoughts. "We're in," Ethan declared, speaking for both him and Mia, their nods of agreement sealing the plan. Jake's response was a hearty laugh and a thumbs up, his readiness to dive headfirst into any activity a trait that had always defined him. The trail was a winding path through the dense forest, the canopy above a mosaic of greens that filtered the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of patterns on the forest floor. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth, a stark contrast to the city's concrete and exhaust we had left behind. "Listen to that," Sarah whispered, a note of wonder in her voice as she paused, her gaze upward. The sound of birdsong filled the air, a natural symphony that spoke of the untamed beauty surrounding us. Our trek was punctuated by laughter and the occasional story, reminiscences of past adventures and shared memories that knit us closer together. Yet, beneath the camaraderie, undercurrents of tension ebbed and flowed, unseen but palpable. The lookout point was indeed as spectacular as promised, the vista a breathtaking expanse of forest, lake, and sky that stretched out before us. "Wow, this is incredible," Mia breathed, capturing the moment in a flurry of photos, her desire to preserve the memory evident in her focused expression. "We should come here for sunrise tomorrow," Jake suggested, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the land met the sky in a distant promise of exploration and discovery. The journey back was lighter, the shared experience of the lookout point bonding us in a way that only nature's grandeur could. Sarah walked by my side, her hand finding mine, a silent gesture of connection that spoke volumes. As we neared the cabin, the sight that greeted us was one of serene beauty, the structure a part of the landscape, as if it had always belonged there. The tranquility of the lake, the whisper of the trees, and the promise of another night under the stars filled me with a sense of peace, a temporary reprieve from the storm of emotions that had been my constant companion. The day faded into evening, and with it, the light shifted, casting long shadows that danced across the cabin walls. We gathered on the porch, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, a daily masterpiece that marked the passage of time in a place that seemed removed from the rest of the world. Dinner was a communal effort, the kitchen alive with activity and the air filled with the aromas of cooking. The conversation flowed easily, the laughter genuine, and for a moment, the complexities of our lives were forgotten, replaced by the simple joy of being together. As the night enveloped us, the stars emerging one by one to claim their place in the tapestry of the sky, I looked around at the faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight, a makeshift family brought together by circumstance and choice. And in that moment, I realized that despite the undercurrents of tension and the unspoken doubts, there was nowhere else I'd rather be. The journey and arrival at the lake house had promised an escape, a break from the routine of our daily lives. Yet, as the evening wore on, it became clear that we had brought our complexities with us, the intricacies of our relationships and individual desires weaving a web that was as beautiful as it was fragile. And as I retired to bed, the sounds of the night a soothing lullaby, I knew that the days ahead would test us in ways we couldn't yet imagine. The morning sun had barely kissed the horizon, its rays filtering through the curtains, painting shadows that danced across the room. Sleep had been a fleeting companion, chased away by the turmoil churning within me. As I lay there, watching the dawn break, a sense of foreboding settled over me, a prelude to the storm that was about to unfold. Sarah was still asleep, her breathing steady and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos that raged inside me. I watched her for a moment, the rise and fall of her chest, the peaceful expression on her face. It was in that quiet observation that the first threads of doubt began to weave their way through my mind, tightening with every passing second. Breakfast was a somber affair, the usual banter replaced by a tense silence that hung heavy in the air. Sarah seemed distant, her smiles forced, her laughter hollow. Jake, too, was different, his usual exuberance tempered, his glances towards Sarah laden with an unspoken tension that set my nerves on edge. "We should take the boat out today," Ethan suggested, breaking the uneasy quiet. "The water's perfect." The idea was met with nods of agreement, a welcome distraction from the undercurrents of discomfort that had settled among us. The preparations were swift, a flurry of activity as we gathered what we needed and made our way down to the dock. The lake was a mirror, its surface undisturbed, reflecting the sky above in a perfect symphony of blue. The boat bobbed gently in the water, its invitation to escape the shore too tempting to resist. As we set out, the engine humming beneath us, I found myself watching Sarah and Jake, their interactions marked by a familiarity that seemed out of place. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of suspicion that grew louder with every whispered conversation, every shared laugh that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Isn't this beautiful?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking through my reverie as she gestured towards the expanse of water that stretched out before us. "It is," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm that raged within. "But not as beautiful as the truth, don't you think?" Her gaze met mine, confusion and then realization dawning in her eyes as the weight of my words settled between us. Jake's attention snapped to us, his carefree demeanor slipping for a moment to reveal a hint of something darker, something guilty. The boat ride continued, the scenery passing by unnoticed as my mind raced. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but could no longer ignore. We anchored in a secluded cove, the water still and clear, a tranquil setting that belied the turmoil that churned within me. As the others dove into the water, laughing and calling to one another, I hung back, the weight of my suspicions anchoring me to the spot. "Alex, come on in. The water's amazing," Sarah called, her invitation floating across the distance. I shook my head, my decision made. "I need a moment," I called back, my eyes never leaving hers. As they swam, I sat there, wrestling with the doubts and fears that had taken root in my heart. The laughter and splashes of water sounded distant, the joy of the moment lost to me. When they returned, the atmosphere was charged, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved tensions. The boat ride back was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, the distance between us more than just physical. The revelation had come, not in words, but in glances and gestures, in the silence that spoke volumes. As we docked, the finality of the moment settled over me, the knowledge that what had been could never be again. The walk back to the cabin was a solitary journey, even in the company of friends. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, and hurt leading the charge. The revelation had laid bare the truth, a truth that threatened to unravel everything we had built. As the cabin came into view, its walls no longer promised refuge but felt like a prison, holding within it the secrets and lies that had been carefully concealed. The door stood open, an invitation to confront the reality that awaited within. Stepping inside, the contrast between the beauty of the day and the darkness of my thoughts was stark. The revelation had changed everything, casting long shadows that would stretch far into the future, its impact yet to be fully realized. The storm was about to break, the revelation just the beginning of a journey through the heartache and betrayal that lay ahead. As I stood there, at the threshold of truth, I knew that the path forward would be one of pain and healing, of endings and new beginnings. But first, the storm had to be faced, its fury endured before the calm could return. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a lingering warmth in its wake, a stark contrast to the cold realization that had taken root within me. The day's events had unfolded like a poorly scripted play, each act revealing more of the facade that had been carefully constructed around us. Dinner was a silent affair, the clinking of cutlery against plates echoing like distant thunder, heralding the storm that was about to break. I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, her gaze heavy with unspoken questions and the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. "Alex, we need to talk." Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a knife. "Not here," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil that raged within. "Let's go for a walk." The night had wrapped the lake house in its embrace, the moon a sliver of light in the velvet darkness. We walked in silence, the gravel path crunching under our feet, each step taking us further from the safety of ignorance and closer to the precipice of truth. "Why have you been so distant?" Sarah's voice broke the silence, her words a mixture of concern and fear. "It's not about distance, Sarah. It's about honesty, about trust," I responded, my words measured, the pain of betrayal sharpening each syllable. "What are you saying?" Her voice trembled, the realization of what was to come dawning on her. "I saw you, Sarah. With Jake." The looks, the whispers. "It's been right in front of me this whole time, hasn't it?" The accusation hung in the air between us, a chasm that widened with every passing second. "Alex, it's not what you think," she pleaded, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "Please, let me explain." But the time for explanations had passed, the moments of doubt and suspicion coalescing into a solid form of betrayal that stood starkly before us. "We came here to escape, to find some peace. But all I found were lies," I continued, the bitterness of the revelation coating my words. "Alex, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." She reached out, her hand seeking mine, a gesture of connection that now felt foreign. I stepped back, the physical distance mirroring the emotional gulf that had formed between us. "Sorry doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the betrayal." The path led us to the edge of the lake, the water a dark expanse that reflected the turmoil in my heart. The sound of the waves lapping against the shore was a soothing balm, a stark contrast to the chaos that unraveled within. "Please, can we just go back and talk about this? There has to be a way to fix this." Sarah's voice was desperate, the realization of what was at stake dawning on her. "There's nothing to fix, Sarah. Some things, once broken, can't be mended," I replied, the finality of my words sealing the fate of what had once been. The unraveling had begun, the threads of trust and love that had bound us together coming undone, each revelation pulling us further apart. The night bore witness to the disintegration of a relationship that had once promised a lifetime of shared dreams and aspirations. As we made our way back to the lake house, the silence was a tangible entity that enveloped us, a shroud of grief for what had been lost. The door stood open, a gateway to a reality that I was no longer sure I wanted to face. Inside, the others were waiting, their faces etched with concern and the unasked questions that hung in the air. The unraveling was not just mine and Sarah's to bear, but a shared burden that would impact us all. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the weight of the truth bore down on us. The unraveling had exposed the fragile foundation upon which our relationships had been built, a foundation that now lay in ruins at our feet. As I stood there, amidst the debris of shattered trust and broken promises, I realized that the unraveling was far from over. The path ahead was uncertain, each step a navigation through the wreckage of what had been, in search of a peace that seemed as elusive as the shifting shadows cast by the moonlight. The night stretched on, the hours passing in a blur of whispered conversations and silent contemplations. The unraveling had left us exposed, the raw edges of our emotions frayed and vulnerable. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, there was a glimmer of something else, hope, perhaps, or the faint promise of redemption. But as dawn approached, its light revealing the full extent of the damage, I knew that some wounds were too deep to heal, some betrayals too profound to forgive. The unraveling had laid bare the truth, a truth that could no longer be ignored or denied. And as the first rays of the sun broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the lake house, I understood that the journey ahead would be one of rebuilding, of finding a way to navigate the aftermath of the storm that had swept through our lives. But for now, the unraveling continued, each moment a reminder of the fragility of trust and the price of betrayal. The morning after the revelation was a somber affair. The lake house that had once been a sanctuary of laughter and warmth now felt like a mausoleum of our former selves. The air was thick with unspoken regrets, and the ghost of yesterday's confessions lingered, a reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. I rose with the sun, its light doing little to dispel the darkness that had settled in my heart. The others were still asleep, or perhaps like me, pretending to find refuge in the silence of their own thoughts. I made my way to the kitchen, the mundane act of brewing coffee a desperate attempt to find normalcy in the chaos that had become our reality. As I sat at the table, cup in hand, the events of the previous night replayed in my mind, a torturous loop of betrayal and hurt. Sarah's words, "I'm sorry, Alex. Please, let's fix this," echoed, a haunting melody of what could have been and what now is lost. The sound of footsteps interrupted my reverie, and I braced myself for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. Sarah entered, her appearance as disheveled as the emotions I saw reflected in her eyes. "Alex," she began, her voice a fragile whisper, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to understand." I interrupted, my voice rising despite my attempt to remain calm. "How can I understand betrayal, Sarah? How do you expect me to just accept this and move on?" She flinched at my words, the pain evident in her expression. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Mistakes are forgetting to lock the door. Sarah, not this." I shot back, the bitterness I felt seeping into every word. The tension between us was palpable, a tangible force that seemed to push us further apart with every passing second. The room felt too small, the walls closing in as we stood there, trapped in the aftermath of our unraveling lives. The silence that followed was broken by the arrival of the others, their presence a reminder that the fallout of our actions extended beyond the two of us. Jake's gaze met mine, a mixture of guilt and defiance in his eyes, while Ethan and Mia exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort at being caught in the crossfire evident. "We need to talk," Ethan finally said, the voice of reason in the midst of our storm. "All of us. This can't go on." And so we sat, a council of broken hearts and bruised egos, each of us laid bare by the events that had transpired. The conversation was a difficult one, accusations and defenses mingling with the desperate need to find a path forward. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Sarah. Not after this," I confessed, the words feeling like a physical blow as they left my mouth. "I know, and I'll regret what I've done for the rest of my life," Sarah replied, her voice cracking with emotion. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right, if you'll let me." The offer hung in the air, a lifeline in the wreckage of our relationship. But as much as I wanted to grasp it, to believe that we could rebuild from the ashes of our betrayal, I knew that some things were irrevocably broken. The meeting ended with no resolutions, just a shared understanding of the pain we had caused each other. The lake house, once a place of escape, now felt like a prison, holding us captive to our mistakes and the hard truths we had been forced to face. In the aftermath of our confrontation, I found myself standing on the dock, the calm waters of the lake a stark contrast to the turmoil that raged within me. The beauty of the sunrise, The promise of a new day offered little comfort, a bitter reminder of the innocence we had lost. As the sun climbed higher, its rays warming the chill that had settled in my bones, I realized that the aftermath of our actions would ripple through our lives for years to come. The trust we had broken, the love we had tarnished, could not be easily repaired. But even in the midst of the despair, there was a glimmer of hope, a faint whisper of a possibility that, in time, we could find a way to forgive, if not forget. The path would be a difficult one, fraught with obstacles and the shadows of our past, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was a journey worth taking. And so, as I stood there, watching the light dance upon the water, I made a silent vow to myself to face the aftermath head-on, to navigate the wreckage of our lives with as much grace and courage as I could muster. For in the end, it was the only way to find peace, both within myself and with those I had loved and lost in the unraveling of our shared story.